Hello, everyone. Welcome to Virtual VSC. My name is Kristen Mills, and I am the Visual Arts Program Manager here at Vermont Studio Center. I'm going to hand it off to Katie Miller, who will introduce herself and the two artists that we have here, and we'll go from there. Take it away, Katie.
There we go. Sorry, I had to unmute myself. You'd think after a year and a half with this technology, I would be used to it. Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Miller, and I'm the Executive Director at Inclusive Art Vermont. We've been around since 1986, and our mission is to use the arts to make Vermont a more accessible place for people with disabilities to learn, create, and exist. We do that through arts education, capacity building, training, and exhibition programs, which is what we're here to talk about today, for Vermonters of all ages, both without disabilities. And a little visual description of myself. I am a 30-something-year-old white woman with really fair skin that this time of year is covered head to toe in freckles. Wearing white headphones and a white and black striped shirt. On my left shoulder, you can see just part of my sleeve tattoo poking out. And I have brown and silver and blue hair that is up in a bun right now. And I'm seated against a gray wall also with lines. It's painted paneling. And there's a bunch of baskets and a potted plant and a couple of wall sconces behind me. So first, I am just going to talk about the mission a little bit more and a little bit about our programs. Kristen, is that okay? Just a little bit? Awesome. I'm going to screen share too, if that's okay. We, again, like I said, do programs for people both with and without disabilities across the state. The first arm of that is arts education, and we serve grades pre-K through 12 in a variety of both in-school childcare settings, and we have a brand new arm of programming for people doing homeschooling. And I'm going to skip a little bit. Vermont Studio Center is taking part in right now. We host a variety of trainings across the year in different topics in making arts programs, or really any programming, more accessible for people with disabilities. And the training that Kristen is part of with Vermont Studio Center is focused on taking a deep dive into exposing, exploring, and dismantling ableism and ableist practices and culture nonprofits. And that training is also combined with consulting hours so they can work one-on-one with Inclusive Arts Vermont staff to sort of workshop specific programs or ideas. And the last arm of our program is exhibition. Aside from the amazing work of both John and Aurora. So our exhibition program was born quite a few years ago in partnership with the Flynn Center for the Performing Arts. And after that first show, there was a few-year gap, and then we had another one. And we were in the middle of strategic planning, and I had this wild dream, and I said, what if we did this as a biennial and did it every other year? And we committed to it, and we did it, and now we're doing it. It's really exciting. And this exhibition travels the state. It usually starts up in the Burlington, Essex area, sort of where our office is located, and goes all throughout the state over the course of a year and a half. The past year, it was a little, but we were really fortunate to have it have a long stint at Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center, which sounds like a weird place to have an art exhibition. However, they have a really incredible art program there, both exhibition and programming. And the interesting thing about that as a venue is over the course of its 6-month stay, almost 40,000 people saw this show, which is way more than would ever be in a gallery, something that in Vermont. We try to have a variety of both traditional and non-traditional art venues to reach a wide audience. And that exhibition is all visual artwork. And it includes anywhere from 25 to just depending on the year. And it's all by Vermont artists with disabilities. And we do have plans. We're looking for funding right now to branch out to performing arts in 2023, which is really exciting. So in the off years of our visual arts exhibition, we'll have a performing arts showcase. stay tuned for more info on that. John and Aurora, I'm wondering if you want to introduce yourselves, or would you like Kristen or I to read your bio? Which would be better for you?
I can introduce myself.
Okay.
I don't know what I said in my bio, but maybe it'll matter. So my name is Aurora Berger. A quick visual description. I am a very pale white woman. I have long blonde hair. I'm in my mid-20s. I am wearing rectangular dark blue metal framed glasses. I have a silver pendant of a piece of ponderosa bark around my neck, and I am wearing a black tank top, and I'm sitting in front of a very messy desk in a bookstore with a bunch of books on a tapestry behind me. Myself, I'm a photographer primarily and a writer. I have been doing art in the Southwest for a long time. I just moved back to Vermont. I say just, it's been like 2 years now. The pandemic has collapsed all of time and space into one little week. I did my undergrad, I did a BFA and a BA in art education in Prescott, Arizona. I did an MFA in visual arts at Claremont Graduate University. My work is really about confronting my experiences with the medical industrial system, ableism, physical, mental illness. I have a visual impairment and a chronic illness / physical impairment. And so my work explores both of those, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. And I also am queer, and my work confronts what a body is supposed to be / is or is not. I think that's it.
Well, thank you, Aurora. I'm John Killacky, and I'm 69 years old. I'm a white guy, balding. You'll see a black and white border collie laying on the floor behind me. I have a black and white cat that will probably jump up here on the camera as well. Bookcase behind me, and on the music stand behind me is the galleys of a book that is of mine that is coming out in October. So it's a very exciting part of an artist thing to be reading the galleys and making sure every single semicolon is correct, because this is the last chance I have on it. So that's what I've been spending my last couple of days doing. I currently serve in the Vermont legislature in the Vermont House of Representatives. I represent South Burlington, and I had moved to Vermont in 2010, and I ran the Flynn Center for 8 years in Burlington. And that's when I began working with inclusive arts. And Katie, I want to correct you about one thing. There was one exhibition you did, your organization did, and then the next time the Flynn got money from the Ford Foundation, and I said to your organization, let's partner again to do that. So this anew now is the third of these that you really had started. And because I really felt like that second one was, we had done so much together, it was only right that we partnered again. So it's incredible, the whole process of having, and at each of the openings, gathering with Aurora and other of the artists, and being called artists is just a profound experience in our lives. And you bring together so many people, and I'm so grateful to Inclusive Arts.
Yeah, and Flourish, that second show was really, I feel like, when, I'll back up a little bit. So the way these exhibitions are designed is partially to make the whole exhibition process more accessible for Vermont artists with disabilities, but also to make the art viewing experience more accessible to a wide audience who might not otherwise be able to enjoy a gallery experience that's accessible. And so Flourish was the one I can remember where we did a sample. We were talking about what pieces are we going to verbally describe or not, because traditionally in museum and gallery settings, you don't verbally describe every piece. And I remember sitting there and I was like, well, can we do all of them? And someone was like, we can certainly try. And so we did. And it became sort of the standard now that we just verbally describe all of them. And that show I feel like it took the accessibility from the first one and just amplified it. And it continues to happen every time as we learn and grow, because, what makes something accessible is always changing, and it means so many things to so many people. So as we learn, we try to implement new things with each show that we learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, before we get started, the show that was up, that just completed, correct?
Yeah, so it just came down from its final stop in the tour last week on Thursday, I believe. It was at the TW Wood for 2 months, I think, or 6 weeks.
Okay.
But it is still available to view online, and will be for quite a while. So folks can go to our website. It's inclusiveartsvermont.org, and then just click the exhibitions tab, and it'll bring you right there. And all of those verbal descriptions are recorded by the lovely Kat Redness, and the text versions of all the verbal descriptions are there as well as pictures of all the artwork. So it's not the same as seeing it in person, but it'll be there until we put up the next show.
Cool, that's excellent.
Yeah. And the call for artists for our next exhibition, which we just found out a few weeks ago that we got a National Endowment for the Arts grant for, which is really exciting.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It feels like a big deal.
That is a big deal.
Because it really, what it does is it makes our capacity bigger to do more with it, and
Exactly.
also do things like bring in other partner organizations to the process to make it more inclusive of different communities
That's
that
incredible.
frankly we could do a better job reaching out to that we haven't before.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. But that,
Katie, I just want to say that really one of the great things your organization did is when you had a panel looking at the submissions, you didn't have the person's disability identified.
Right.
And so much society wants to know, are you blind? Are you deaf? Are you quadriplegic? Are you paraplegic? What, are you on the spectrum? And it was such a pleasure to look at work, decide what is the best work here for the show and what works make sense together. And then afterwards, the artist could choose to self-identify their own disability, but not to be labeled, this is a piece by a blind artist.
Right.
It was really game-changing, I think, in the whole field.
Yeah, we take that out of it. And actually, we don't ask on any of our registration or application materials for any of our programs what someone's diagnosis is. If they want to self-disclose it, that's fine. What instead we ask is, what accommodations do you need? Or what can we do to make this a successful experience for you? And what does that mean to you? And it's not to say that we don't care or we're not interested if someone wants to share that, but it's not necessarily any of our business what their diagnosis is. And so really what the application process is like, hey, we're having the show. Here's the theme. If you identify as an artist with a disability, submit work to it. And it's that simple. And we've had people call and say, oh, well, I have cerebral palsy, or I'm blind, or my disability is XYZ. Can I submit? And I'm like, yeah, sure. It doesn't, if you define yourself as disabled, then yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Excellent.
And Aurora, how did you do with that in the submissions? How did you identify or choose not to?
To be honest, I have absolutely no idea.
Okay.
It was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah. I'd have to
I
look
think
myself.
it's likely that I didn't identify it because I had also just been working with the Kennedy Center and their VSA program, and I was grumpy about disclosing things because they required like doctor's notes to prove that you were disabled.
Oh my gosh.
And I was mad at them, so I probably didn't disclose.
Yeah.
Wow. That's wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way the federal government does things and the way we do things are a little bit different.
Yeah. You're up against a lot. Well, we all are, but especially it's just a fight. It's a constant fight. I don't know why everything has to be such a fight, but.
Well, I think even just tracing the lineage of the naming of it was very special arts that Gene Kennedy founded at the Kennedy Center you know, and then it became, our organization became an affiliate of Very Special Arts Vermont, and then really it changed its name to really Inclusive Arts, to really kind of change again the paradigm of what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Right.
VSA, like now they're just named VSA, and they, if you look on Wikipedia, you can find out what it means, but like their name is just VSA now.
Oh, I see.
Right.
I see.
Which I think
For
is funny.
for a long time, so before Inclusive Arts Vermont was named what it is now, we were called VSA. And
Right.
before that, we were VSA Arts of Vermont, which means, and VSA stood for Very Special Arts. So it was Very Special Arts of Vermont. And then way, way back, it was Very Special Arts. And we have always been a network affiliate member of the VSA program of the Kennedy Center. And we still are to this day. We receive contract funds from them for some of our programs. However, I think that, you know, the word special in the name is problematic. And what's also hard is in Vermont, you know, we weren't allowed to say, at least according to the Kennedy Center, we weren't allowed to use the whole names spoken out. So what wound up happening was I still, to this day, get calls at my office for the Vermont Soccer Association or the Vermont Superintendents Association. Because people just Google VSA and then they call the first number that comes up without reading the full name. So yeah, we're very pleased to have a name that is more reflective of who we are and what we do.
It's similar to if you try to Google things about the ADA, you end up on the American Dental Association's website.
Yeah, I've noticed, yes.
I can't imagine, they must get so many hits from people trying to get like the actual text of the ADA. Autofills.com and takes you to the American Dental Association's website.
That's crazy.
It's great to claim these words, though. Even, I mean, we're in Pride Month now, Kristen, as you said, and you know, I identify as a gay man, but I love how queer has been taken back, and Netflix has now this 2 seasons of this gay male comedian who has cerebral palsy, and it's called Special.
Oh, no way.
It's just great. So he sees that term, oh, aren't you special?
Yeah.
And he just, you know, he turned it on its side. And I think that's what's so great about some of this stuff is, you know, phrases change.
Absolutely.
So
I just want to say hi to Kathy. That's Kathy Black. She's the program director at Vermont Studio Center.
Hi, Kathy.
Good to see you. I'm so happy to hear you all talking. I'm sorry I missed the beginning.
It was mostly me in the beginning. Don't worry, I'll make you watch it. We were just about to jump in. I don't know, Kathy, if you want to do a visual description of yourself. You're kind of in the shadows. Don't feel obligated, but we just went around and did that.
Oh, well, I can give it my best. It's a very shadowy picture of a woman between 2 windows with reading glasses on and gray hair.
I'm writing down women between 2 windows because that's like that Zach Galifianakis show, Between Two Ferns. So I'm gonna use that, Kathy.
I like it. You know, on Zoom, it's sort of, yeah, you have to pay attention to where the light's coming from. And
Right.
I was paying attention to get my computer linked back up.
Oh yeah, no worries at all. Okay, so I'm super excited to hear from both John and Aurora. Are we ready for that, Katie? Can I do that? Can I?
Yeah.
Bing. That's
yes, please.
I'm not sure who wants to go first. I'm happy to say who goes first or flip. I have a coin right here. But you each have 10, 15 minutes, you know, dazzle away.
Well, I want to learn from Aurora. So I would ask Aurora if you'd be willing to go first.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you,
Let me
Aurora.
Screen share and we'll see how well it works. You know, as I said earlier, I made a beautiful PowerPoint earlier and then I deleted it because that's what I do when I'm trying to work. I'm really good at deleting documents without saving them. It's a skill of mine. So anyway, this is my last minute one. That's my name. That's my website. This slide, I'm not going to do visual descriptions on my slides, but just to say that I do have image descriptions on everything on my Instagram, and soon to be on my website when I get around to writing the rest of them that are not on Instagram yet. But most of the photos that are in this PowerPoint are on my Instagram as well, at least whichever one's Instagram will let me post. All right, so I am primarily a photographer, and the work that's in this PowerPoint is photography. I've dabbled in installation art when I was in grad school, and I have dabbled in other things on occasion. I'm currently working on some collaborative work that I'm very excited about that will hopefully take me out of photography a little bit. And then I also am a writer, and I'll talk about that at the end. But for the last 2.5 years or so, I've been working on a book. And so I have not been taking as many photographs as I used to. I'm also in Vermont, where it is incredibly cold most of the time outside. And I, as you'll see, mostly shoot naked. So since I live with my parents, I really need to go out into the woods to do that. I do not have a photo studio in my home. And yeah, Vermont's not the best place for doing that, but you'll see what I've got. So let's see. Okay. So this is sort of a taste of my original work that I started doing with my body. I took these when I was in undergrad. So I was about 21 or 22. And I was really starting to come to terms with the fact that I did have a disability. I've been visually disabled my entire life. I didn't realize the extent to which I was visually disabled until I was about 17, when I had eye surgery and suddenly realized that I could see a whole lot better than I'd ever been able to see before. And that probably meant that I hadn't seen a lot of things as a child. And that was a fun experience. And it also made it a lot harder for me to read, and it changed a lot of things. My brain sort of didn't rewire to having new eyesight. So things that I technically can see, I can't focus on, or my brain can't interpret the focus of, which is a really fascinating concept to me. So I had always sort of been experimenting with that. I had done some work earlier that had to do with like blurriness and focus, and it was interesting, but it felt like I wasn't exploring my own experience. I was just trying to explore sort of what an experience could be for another person if they too had a visual disability. And right around my last year of college, I started having more health issues. I was starting to like realize that my body was a different body than I had always thought it was. I was starting to realize that my connective tissues didn't really work the way they should, even though I knew that already. I had sort of ignored it and been like, I'm fine. It's all fine. If I just ignore this, that'll go away. And it turns out that really just doesn't work very well. So I did this series, and it originally I thought was going to be, you know, like the sexy, not even sexy, but like the nice like black and white nudes that Robert Mapplethorpe or Francesca Woodman would do. And it turned out to be much deeper than that, because I started realizing that there were all these details of my body that I had never even noticed. And so I don't have the one that I'm thinking of at the moment in here, but I started noticing that I had stretch marks in places that I'd never seen them before, because I'm pale and can't see and I never noticed them. And things like just the way that my bone structure is, or the way that my hands look and feel, and the way that things about my body look, because I just had never thought about my body as something that you could look at. So I shot these in my bedroom in Arizona in a terrible studio that I had made. And then I came back to Vermont for a while to have eye surgery again. And I brought these fabric prints home with me. I had a big industrial printer at my grad program, which was very handy. So I made these giant fabric prints of all of these photos I'd taken of myself in my studio. And I started putting them in places in the woods around my parents' house. And I put them all there in early June. And I took them down when I left in like the end of August. So they were there for a few months. And I went out every week or two and I would take photographs of them, and I put them all over the place. So like, there could still be one out there. I have no idea. I did not draw myself a map, which was not smart. And I made some very poor decisions about those, but they were really fascinating to me. And there was this experience of re-entering a space that I had always known. I grew up there. I learned to walk there. I learned to see there. I think to me as a Vermonter, it was really important to recognize how much the land around me as I grew up had impacted who I was, and that I had grown up playing in this stream every day. And I had grown up knowing how to exist in this space. And I realized that when I was in the woods, my vision didn't really matter as much. And I realized this primarily because I was blind in one eye for a month that summer. And I realized that it didn't make a difference when I was in the woods. It made a difference when I was at a computer, or when I was like trying to read books or go to a movie theater, or even just like hanging out with friends, because it's weird, you can't see people's faces. But I realized that when I was in the woods, it didn't make a difference, because I know how to get around the woods by feel. I know how things sound. I know which side of me the brook is on, even if I can't see it. I know how if I step on a stone in the stream, I know if it's going to move beneath me if I put my weight on it. I know my directions in those woods, even though I am absolutely horrible at directions on concrete. I cannot understand suburbia for the life of me. And I realized that it was a really important part of me. So I left these weird fabric bodies of my own creation that were literally me. And I just sort of left them in the woods to see what the woods wanted to do to me. And I would go back and I would hang out with them and listen to weird audiobooks like Susan Sontag, which is not a uplifting audiobook to listen to regarding the pain of others. But, I'd sit there with my camera and my audiobooks and just enjoy the space and the experience of being part of those woods. So these photos are all from that series. I was really thinking about what restoration means. I'm really interested in this quote. Eli Clare has a quote. I'm going to read it, where he says, "Cure grounds itself in an original state of being, relying on the belief that existed before is superior, and what exists currently, or I should say, relying on the belief that what existed before is superior to what exists currently. But for some of us, even if we accept disability as damage to individual body minds, these tenets quickly become tangled because an original non-disabled state of being doesn't exist." And I was really thinking about that, of this idea of cure and trying to become a person that you can't become because your body is never going to be that person. And I thought about, the restoration of forests and the restoration of bodies, and how you can't take a piece of fabric that's been in the woods and you can't make it white again. It's never going to be. It's just going to be a new form and a new body. I was really proud of how sneakily I hid this one, because it was very close to the road and I don't think anyone found it. And also because it makes me look like I'm underwater, which sounds scary. This is the photograph that's in the new show. If you go online, you can see it. And here, I think Katie described it, I'm pretty sure. So there you go.
So I hope I did it justice.
You definitely did a better job than I do on Instagram, so I'll give you that.
Higher character count.
This one's called Tangled. I like it. I also have photographs of it in the middle of a thunderstorm when I definitely should not have been standing in a stream, but was. And then this is the next step that the body photographs took. I was out there shooting these weird fabric bodies, and I decided I should probably start trying to shoot my own body and how I fit into a space and how that space makes me feel as a person. So I started taking these big photographs, and it was a really delightful experience for that 1 month that I was really ambitious, that, you know, had energy. This is another one. It's in the ferns. And then I've also been thinking about, again, thinking about cure, but also what a body is and how we are these like weird little medical file bodies. And then we're also these human beings who have lives and spirits and, you know, are humans and people. And there's the social model and the medical model of disability. And basically the medical model of disability says that your body is broken, it needs to be fixed. Your eyes are broken, they should be 20/20. The way to cure you is to get you to 20/20 vision, otherwise you're broken. The social model says you don't need to be able to see, you just need everyone to accommodate that you can't see. So there needs to be Braille in restaurants, there has to be, you know, ample sidewalk space, and you need to have access to seeing eye dogs that it doesn't cost $8 million. And I have problems with both of those models because I am not really that interested in being fixed. There are certain things I'd like fixed, but as like a whole body, I'm pretty okay with being a body that is disabled. But I also don't really agree with the social model, which is a little bit controversial of me, but I also have chronic pain and chronic migraines, and those things aren't going to go away just because people can accommodate them. I will still experience pain and I'll still be exhausted. And even if people accommodate me, I'm still going to feel pain. And that is not something that the social model makes space for. And so I was thinking about those two things. These photos are from separate times, but that's a heart monitor and the bruises from IVs and blood draws. That's those. And then I'm really interested in cyanotypes, which are a kind of photographic process where you take a negative and you print it in the sun, and they're these beautiful blue prints. The reason I'm so into cyanotypes, two reasons. One, you don't need an actual darkroom to do them. You can make them in your yard, which is very helpful. Since I do not have a dark room anymore. The other reason is that there's no way to know what it's going to look like until it's done. Chance is a really big part of the process. And so you end up with these brush strokes or places that you missed when you were painting your paper with the formula. And you end up with these spaces where dust floated down onto your negative during your 10-minute exposure. And you end up with places where the sun melted part of your negative, and now you've got like a weird streak in it. And these guys are really large. These two are about 30 inches long. I think they're 20 by 30s. I made them in a kiddie pool in the backyard of my grad school program. So, you know, work with what you have. On a giant table with a piece of plexiglass that I got at Home Depot. And then these are another two of the 20 by 30s. Again, like this is an example of how chance really changes a cyanotype. They're the same negative. There's a little blue spot on this guy. I don't know if you guys can actually see my cursor, but where like a piece of the cloth that I had underneath them flipped over in the wind, and it like created this spot where it got underexposed. And you can see on the darker one a spot where I missed it with a paintbrush. And I love that nature and chance creates these art pieces as much as I do. I take two pieces of paper, or a piece of paper and a piece of plastic, and I put them together in the sun, and then something happens and it's not my work in any way. And so to me, like these pieces are a weird collaboration with nature, which I really love, and also reminds me a lot of Sally Mann's work, which makes me happy because I love her. This is my most recent one that I made. This is me laying in the woods in Vermont in the fall. And again, like I somehow missed like a huge chunk of this paper with my paintbrush when I was painting it in the dark. And I just love the way that adds to the image instead of taking away from it. And then I just wanted to put these in. These are my grad school MFA show. This is 2 different views. Obviously, that grid is not 2 separate grids. Some photographs with different focal lengths, the same black and white photos, and then this is the grid in detail. It was basically a bunch of my outtakes from the summer project, and then some of the black and white originals. And I called the giant grid remnants from the medical industrial complex, because to me, that's really what all these body parts are. The medical system breaks you down into these little body parts, and then nature kind of puts you back together in a way. And then there's a wall painting of my EKG that went all the way around the whole gallery. It was a real pain to paint. I don't recommend doing that. And really hard to paint back over. And then I just wanted to put these in. These are my most recent project that I've done. This it's called Homestead. These are photographs from my childhood. They're all taken between 1994 and 1997 in this little house that is still standing. But essentially my parents were evicted from the land that they built the house on, because they built it on a friend's land and the friend sold the land. And so my parents actually built this house. It is built out of an old phone house that existed for the party line for the area. And so my father built it with his friends while my mother was pregnant with me. And after they were evicted, they didn't do anything with the house. It's actually filled with trash. And you can see the windows and the insulation and everything. The insulation might be my father's fault. He went back and took down a lot of the boards that were on the house and put them in a friend's barn to build the next house. But this series is sort of a revisiting of this place that is still sitting. It's like 2 miles from where I live now. And it's a really, I think that the photographs of me as a child say a lot about who I am now as I've worked on this, and that revisiting the place and seeing how time has changed some things and really not changed other things has been a really great experience. So that's been my most recent project. And then this is what I'm doing right now. This is what my desktop looks like. I literally just took a screenshot of it while we were talking. So yeah, I'm writing a book. I have a little bit of my writing online if anybody wants to read it. It's all about disability and art. The book is about disability and contemporary art. It will hopefully be a real book that you can buy one day when I finish writing it and I get a publisher to like me. But there's a couple of essays on my website. There's one called A Shared Humanity, which is about institutionalization, and was in a book. And there's one called Returning the Gaze, which is about Joel Peter Witkin and Diane Arbus and what disabled bodies, how disabled bodies have been represented in photography over the years. And there's also a very long essay about accessibility in higher ed. So if you know anyone who works in higher ed, you are welcome to send that. And that is, I think, it. That's pretty much where I've been at for the last very long time.
Awesome. Thanks, Aurora.
Yeah, thanks, Aurora. That was excellent.
What I love being paired with you, Aurora, is that I started as a dancer, and then I went into arts administration. I was managing some dance companies. And then in the 90s, as friends began to die from AIDS, I was just overwhelmed. So I started making videos, first writing about it a lot and then making videos. But like you, Aurora, I went with my body. It was an embodied voice. And so I'm often in those pieces, I'm nude in them. Other people are nude in them. It was a time to reclaim our bodies and to make sure that people were so frightened back in the late 80s and early 90s about what is this disease? What is this pandemic? And, you know, we got some of that. We just lived through it again. But it was important to me to make the body sacred. So I love that I'm sharing this with you, because it's the same thing. We go back and we reclaim our bodies. It's really an important part of both claiming our space in the world, but also about healing. And so I did that. I did three AIDS videos. 25 years ago, I had an unexpected surgery that paralyzed me from the neck down. And so I woke up quadriplegic, and it took me about 3 months to learn how to walk again. I am paraplegic now. I ambulate with a cane, or I'm right now sitting in my wheelchair at home. But what was interesting to me is that I then took those strategies I was doing as an artist around AIDS into the disability body. And so again, I brought in nudity, and I have a beautiful piece called Dreaming Awake that I was working with dancers with disabilities, but I wanted everyone to be nude. And I said, but we're going to leave our apparatus out of it. If you use a chair, the chair is not going to be there. If you use a cane, it's not going to be seen. It's important that we'll hold each other, we'll dance together, we'll work together on this. And so many people said to me, well, there's no one disabled in the piece. And I said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, only you're sitting in a wheelchair, but everyone else is dancing. I said, but all of them are people with disabilities. But it's interesting because society looks at the chair and defines us, or the cane, or the dog, or whatever it is that we have our support with. And by taking that away and just going back to the body, as you are doing, Aurora, in your piece, it makes people think in a different way. And so I guess I've made 16 films, which they've been great. They've been well received, aired on television and museums and stuff. I also, in 2003, put a book out called Queer Crips, Disabled Gay Men and Their Stories. But what was fascinating back then, we were talking earlier about paradigm shifts. I went to the gay presses and they were like, what? No, we're not interested in this unless there's buff boys and lipstick dykes. There's no market for it. But the disability presses were as bad as the gay presses. They were saying, oh, no. We want to have happy, well-adjusted. These magazines we do are for people to show the other side of disability. And I said, well, that's not true. And so what we did in our book is there was already a women's book out, a lesbian book on disability, but I invited gay men to write about it. We talked about despair, we talked about pain, we talked about depression, we talked about suicide, we talked about hiring hustlers, we talked about things that were real. And eventually, I'm grateful, Hayworth Press did publish it, and it won a Lambda Literary Award. So I think part of it is that we have to start telling these stories that are true and not what society wants, because society is so afraid of disability. So many people, even now, 25 years, saying, oh, you look so much stronger, you're feeling better, right? And I was like, well, yeah, I'm having a good day, but I keep thinking, who am I reassuring here? The person who's afraid of my disability projecting. So it's an interesting issue of when you make art. Now, not all of my works are based on AIDS or disability. I did a concert video for PBS on a singer I love named Janice Ian. The book that you see the galleys in the back that I'm working on, it has a combination of speeches I gave at commencement addresses, formal academic pieces I've written, interviews I've done with Tony Kushner, but also embedded through it is interviews with Judy Smith from the Axis Dance Company, Eli Clare, Kenny Freeze, a lot of my queer disability heroes, really, Terry Galloway, these are all people. But we're talking to them about artists and the art they make. And I think that's what's really important, is to figure this out, how to do that. I also sit in the legislature, and Katie and I can talk about how we had to teach the Flynn and other organizations about how to be more inclusive. the legislature is a nightmare around accessibility. We were having, there's a tradition where as a new legislator, you come in and it's a grand procession and you're called one at a time and you can take an open seat of the 150 seat chamber. And all the tenured legislators keep their seat if they want it. So I had to go to the Speaker of the House and I said, well, that's not going to work. And she said, why? And I said, well, I walk with a cane. I need an aisle seat. She said, well, that's not the procedure we have. And I said, well, it has to be the procedure. And she said, and then she realized, it was like, oh, of course, it's no problem. But I have to say it ruffled feathers because people were saying, you changed tradition. And it's like, well, wait a minute, the ADA was 1990. What are we talking about? 2 years ago? It's crazy. And then we have Disability Awareness Day every year in the chamber. And this is my second term, so we didn't have it last year because of COVID, but in the previous session we had it. It was very thrilling to see our disabled colleagues come to the State House to talk about issues. But right before it was the full session was about to begin, one of my friends in a chair said, oh, we've been told we have to stay out in the hallway. It's like, what? Well, because there's no room for us in the chamber. So I went to the Speaker of the House and said, how can we have Disability Awareness Day and ask people to be in the hallway? It's like being in the back of the bus. This is craziness. And of course it was like, oh, yes, of course. So it's this lack of awareness that is really an interesting issue. And even as we had to go virtual, we all transitioned to Zoom, but then there was no captioning. There was everyone was so proud about how accessible we were. And I said, well, accessible to who? You know, so we were late adapters with that too. And the issue was it had to be brought up versus in the fabric of the work. It's not different than when I ran the Flynn or I ran the Yerba Buena Center in San Francisco, or I worked at Walker Art Center. Advocates would come in and demand that we change. We had to change. But most arts organizations to this day think that architectural accommodation is inclusion. And architectural accommodation is from 1990. It's not inclusion. And so we worked very hard, and Katie talked earlier in our session about learning together about how to be more inclusive about in the visual arts. We did the same thing with Katie's organization with creating sensory-friendly theater to invite families with kids on the spectrum to come in and participate, because they have been felt that they weren't welcomed at the Flynn or theaters. And when the theater goes dark, it's often very scary and noises become disruptive in a traditional theater going experience. Well, we changed it. We listen to people and we leave the lights up a little bit. We take the sound levels down. We have, fidgets if people want them. If people want to walk in and out, that's okay. If they want to see it through their devices, it's okay. The artists were great with this. They worked with us on it and understood that all noises are great, and that where they may get a laugh line may not be where you get the laugh line, but it was fine. And what was beautiful about it is our families with toddlers said, we can now bring the whole family to the Flynn. And it just proved that it works for everybody. There is no special accommodation, And so it's an interesting thing about disability and arts and the aesthetics of it. And it's nice to be here with all of you. I'll stop there.
Thanks, John. I feel like that makes me want to say so many things, but I will say I want to share one of my favorite quotes that I usually share in almost any training we do when we talk about what's called universal design, which, if you're not familiar, universal design was born out of making places physically accessible, but now is applied to things like education. And really it's making sure that a physical space or a learning environment or whatever it is that you're talking about is usable by all different types of people. Because the truth is there's no one correct, quote unquote, right only way to interact with the world or to enter the world. and everyone does it differently. But anyway, my favorite quote is that universal design is good design. And I usually follow that up with what's good for one person is usually good for a lot of people.
Mhm. I think John might be frozen.
I think so.
I love the face that he's frozen with.
Okay,
Oh, you're back.
I'm back. Okay,
that
thank
was-
you.
That was a really, really, really great talk from both of you. I got a lot out of it. Do you
Well-
have time for a couple questions?
Yeah, let me share one experience with Katie in that when we did the Flourish exhibition, we had all the audio descriptions, and one of the artists was someone who was nonverbal, and he was just thrilled to go on his device and listen to the audio description of his work. And he came over to me, took me by the arm, and brought me over to stand in front of his work. But we watched it through his device and hearing the audio description. And he was telling me about his piece in a very different way. And he was also listening to people describe his pieces in a different way than probably it had ever happened. And so it was one of these great aha moments that the world is so much better with universal design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's that what it really comes down to is that openness for continuous improvement. Like at Inclusive Arts Vermont, we don't ever claim to have it all down, and we are always open to suggestions from people on how to do things differently or better. And actually, verbal description is a great example. We were doing a verbal description training, I think for Flourish maybe, and we were telling people about how to do it and practicing. And when we do it in our office, we always practice using the artwork on the walls. And everyone goes through their sample description, and they're all long and eloquent and whatever. And this person who's in the training with us, a staff member at the time, who's a person with intellectual disabilities, was like, I don't get it. Why can't you just call it a happy snowman? And we were like, oh my gosh, like the actual descriptions themselves need to be accessible too. And that's why now we always do two versions. We have a short form, which is 2 to 3 sentences, and a long form that's usually like a page or 2, depending on the piece. So yeah, I think what John's talking about, and to piggyback off that, is just to bring it way back, the ADA was 31 years ago. And another line I really like is like, a ramp is not enough. Like a ramp is great, but it's not enough. And there are so many things we could be doing. And I'll stop there.
No, that's great. Do you both have, or anybody, all of us, do we have time for questions? Well, you can just leave if you don't. I'm just gonna ask questions.
I'm here.
Okay. Aurora, can I ask you then? I was looking at your Instagram actually, because I'm an avid Instagrammer, and that's how I feel like I get to know people. It's
Fair
like
enough.
a curated version of themselves, but not their website. It's a little more personal, And one thing I noticed you said in an image I thought was really interesting. It was an image that was of your parents' bedroom. And I think it's called My Parents' Bedroom, 2017. And it actually looked like it was a library. So that I was interested in, that what it was described as and what I was looking at, to me, didn't really necessarily make sense. But what you wrote was, I'm just going to start posting old work because I'm always exhausted and the pressure to constantly make new work is unnecessary. And so my question is, being a person who identifies as a queer, disabled artist and writer, are there pressures that you do think are necessary?
Yes. Also, I can show that picture because I feel like I should. And I actually have it up. Hold on. Let me see. So while I talk, I will show you this photograph of my parents' bedroom, which was taken in 2017, but looks exactly the same now. So there you go. It does look like a library. It looks awful lot like the bookstore I'm sitting in right now. The whole house looks like that. My bedroom looks like that. It is definitely part of who I am. And it's one of the reasons I took the photo was I just thought it was a great portrait of like our family, but specifically of my parents, because those 80s paperbacks that are stuck up to the ceiling, no one's going to touch again. And they're very dusty and scary. But that those 80s paperbacks have probably moved to 30 different houses, and they're part of what I've discovered about my parents is that the things that they value are in words often. A lot of the things that they've managed to actually hold on to, that they've cared about keeping through all of the times that they've moved, and we've been, our stuff has been in people's garages, in people's barns, wherever, in the backs of trucks. We moved a lot when I was a kid. They moved a lot before I was born. Those books have stayed, and I've always thought that was something that was very valuable about. It shows what people value, I guess. I too am an avid collector of books, which is why I'm hanging out in a used bookstore. And I may have bought like $50 worth of used books in the last day, but whatever. However, I do think that there are some pressures that are important. I think that the pressure to constantly be creating is useless. I think it just makes people feel inadequate. I think that the pressure to be creating things that matter is important. I really think that it's important to be making things. If you're an artist, I think that it's important to keep having a practice, even if that practice isn't making, maybe it's just thinking about what it could be, or writing about what it could be, or just being a part of a community of other artists who are thinking about what things can be. But I really just feel like art needs to be moving forward right now, in the art world. Like, we need to move forward as like a whole. I think that there's a lot, and I could go on for literally hours about there's a lot of art that we still revere as being great art, when we've now found out that the artists were really exploitative and whatever, all the old white men in the museums, right? And I think that art is moving forward. I think it is, and I'm really excited to be moving forward with it. But I think that people need to be acknowledging that it's moving forward and not just sticking to the old, the old ways. I think people are stuck. There are lots of people who are stuck there. There are a lot of, very famous artists who have made a career off of that work, and they're not going to change, and they don't have an interest in changing to make their work have that conversation. Their work is just going to have the same conversation over and over for the rest of eternity. We're going to see Jeff Koons balloons forever, and he's not going to make something that he's not going to turn around and say, actually, I care about the problems that we're facing right now. He's just going to keep making balloon dogs because they're making him money. And I really wish that artists like Jeff Koons could take their crazy huge platforms and do something with them. And so I think that that's a really important pressure. And then I also think that a personal pressure to be creating is important to me. It makes me feel awful when I don't do it, but it makes me feel really accomplished and proud of my own creations when I can make things. And I think it's really tough when you're disabled, or just existing under capitalism and don't have time and don't have energy, and it's really hard to be laying in bed and going, I should be outside with my camera making work, and I'm just really tired, and I feel bad because it's a perfect day and it's beautiful out and I have all these ideas, but I just really can't get out of bed. And I think that pressure to be constantly creating, to be constantly posting on Instagram and curating yourself and saying look at all this new work I made. Look at me, I make new work every week. I'm incredible. It just isn't necessary at all. Mm-hmm. That was a very long answer to your question.
Good answer though.
I I think or I think I have a different path, is that I've really always had a hybrid career as an arts administrator. I was at the Walker Art Center as a curator of performing arts when I started making my videos. And at first, I really felt like I had to bifurcate the identity. I remember the Harvard Film Archives was showing some of my AIDS videos, and someone in the audience raised their hand and said, "Oh, do you ever get confused with that guy with the same name at the Walker?" And I said, "No." And then I realized afterwards, I apologized to him and I said, I'm really sorry. I felt like if as an artist I admitted I was an administrator, I'd be less of an artist. Or if as an administrator, I admit that I'm an artist, I'm less of an administrator. And I thought, what's that about? I just make pieces slowly. Every couple of years I make a piece. This book I'm putting together, coming out this fall, is writings from the last 30 years of work. And what I love about it is, I just did a review of Sarah Schulman's History of ACT UP, which is a magnificent book, and it was my era in New York. And next week in 7 days, I have a profile of the head of the American Ballet Theater, is originally from Burlington, Kevin McKenzie, and he's retiring. So I have a profile of the ballet star from our own town here. But I realized when I write about these artists that I care about, I'm telling my own life story as well. So I actually think that's part of my praxis, is doing these critical essays. So the book has those as well. And you mentioned Eli Clare. Eli's in there, Alison Bechdel's in there, Terry Galloway. So it's sort of my, many of them are my queer heroes. But by talking with them, having public conversations with them, writing about the work, I get to tell my own story, as well as then voiceovers from my films and stuff are interspersed throughout the book. But I made a film in 2019, a short film with Eiko Otake about our mothers. And so this is really my next art project, is this book. But I continue to write for Vermont Digger. I write political pieces a lot, and on my political day job and the Vermont House and papers. And I write for the Gay and Lesbian Review. So I'm always kind of writing about different aspects of myself. And the writing's really important to me to talk about.
I completely agree. The reason I stuck my screenshot of all my writing into the end of my art presentation is people always ask me what are you doing right now? And I'm like, oh, I'm working on my book. And they're like, oh, okay. I was like, no, the book it's both all consuming and also completely irrelevant in some ways, because nobody can see it. There's nothing for them to see. I can be like, I've written 30,000 words, and there's nothing for you to look at. It just exists in a computer in a cloud somewhere, but at the same time, as I write this book that is about contemporary art and disability, I'm constantly doing research about other disabled artists, but also, the histories of institutionalization, the histories of documentary photography, the histories of all of these different aspects. And not only does it make me furious, which then inspires me to make art about my feelings, it also gives me an outlet to write about the ways that I interpret disability. And it's really changed the ways that I interpret disability art and the way that I think about it. And I also, coming from a very different background, because I come from academia, where writing is supposed to be you're supposed to publish to get further in your career, but the publishing isn't really relevant. You just have to do it. And I've always thought that was ridiculous. And so this has been a much slower process and much more intimate. And I handwrite everything and then I dictate it, and it's ridiculously slow. But there's something about that process of saying, okay, today's project is, today I was writing about the sculpture of Stephen Hawking, Ubermensch, that the Chapman brothers made that I despise. And so for the last 2 weeks I've been writing about that piece and really analyzing it myself and reading all the criticisms of it that different people wrote and like researching the show that it was in and reading the background on that and then reading the Nietzsche that the title comes from and all of these like different pathways to really explore like that web that surrounds this one piece, all of the ideas, all the different people's interpretations. People had like, there were reviews that were really ableist in both positive and negative reviews. And there were reviews that talked about like shock therapy and all of these bizarre things. And I just finished that section today, like an hour before this. And very glad that I don't have to look at that sculpture anymore. But I think that it's really changed, even just like that one sculpture. I've done a lot of research that will then inform my opinions about disability and art moving forward, even if it's just in some small way. So I always say they go together. And someone told me that they read an essay on my website and then they were like, oh, now I understand what you mean by your art goes with your things. Because I have an essay about Diane Arbus and Joel Peter Witkin. And I think that essay explores why my art is not like theirs in a lot of ways.
I think having art that's not like anything else is the best art to make. You know.
Yes.
I know we're going over time. John, I just want to know, where can I see your videos?
Well, they're on Vimeo.
Oh, they are.
If you just
Okay.
do John Killacky on Vimeo, they're all, many of them, I think there's like 9 of them posted.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. And
I'm
Vermont
excited.
PBS has shown a couple of them. So they're on the website as well. You know, if I bring my legislator self into our conversation tonight, I reintroduced a eugenics apology that was then passed by the legislature. And, you know, if you really, really understand what happened in our country and in Vermont, you know, in 1931, there was legislation that people could be sterilized. With the eugenics movement that had swept here. And people with disabilities were institutionalized against their will. They were sterilized against their will. And in the state hospital, there's a sign that says 19 or so unnamed graves.
Wow.
Now, people went into that state hospital with names and identities,
Right.
and they died unnamed.
Wow.
So it's kind of a astounding issue of you know what our state has done. You know, it targeted the poor, it targeted the French Canadians, it targeted the indigenous tribes, it targeted the other, targeted people who were incarcerated, but the people with disabilities were really targeted as we're going to eliminate, you know, and you know it seems like it's not happening, but look at Britney Spears.
Yeah.
Part of the agreement is that she had to continue doing birth control. It's like, what are we talking about in this world? You know, so anyway, as you were talking about, I was thinking the whole eugenics movement might be something that, you know, you can really inform some.
It's definitely in there. There's a great book about Vermont eugenics.
Yes,
think it's
Nancy
literally
Gallagher.
called, like Vermont eugenics or something like that. It's got a white cover with green writing on it. And yeah, I mean, I just was going to say, like, the sterilization laws, Buck versus Bell, it was the federal sterilization law was never overturned. It's that little of a priority, you know.
Wow.
States have made laws saying that you can't sterilize people anymore, but Buck versus Bell is still on the books. Eli Clare has a fantastic essay about it. I recommend it. Yeah, it's like I said, it's been a really fantastic experience to be just sort of diving into all of these pieces of disability history and thinking about the ways that they inform who we've become and how epigenetics has informed who we become and how being queer and disabled has informed who we've become. And all of these, you know, every artist has their own backstory and their own connections to these things that have happened to people for generations. And those those same ideas, like even if my, personal ancestors haven't been hurt by them, been hurt by other things, but the laws have created a environment where they can still damage people today. So things like Britney's IUD, which now the whole country is talking about, but no one's talking about the fact that you can still sterilize disabled women against their will in prison. No one's talking about that, even though, Britney is on every headline, and, also we sort of put her in that place as a human public. So we're not really taking accountability for that either. We're sort of just looking at it as like, oh my God, this is horrible. And as we all know, in a week, everyone will have forgotten, and it will be, old news, and people will be like, oh, on to the next problem. But there's still so many problems with our medical system that are really born out of ableism and eugenics, and it's honestly an incredibly eye-opening thing to explore. I think a lot of people are really surprised when they learn how bad the medical system can be for disabled people, and that definitely comes out of our history.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to close this.
Oh, I'll say something, Kristen.
Go ahead.
It doesn't really pull us back from the dark edge, but I was saying, listening to Aurora, you were talking about how that getting your surgery made you sort of really aware of how it was that you did see.
Mhm.
And I think we're like so busy dividing ourselves up into these different groups. It just made me think about how little we know about what we know, because sometimes there are certain artists, and when they're making their artwork, they use light or they use a photograph or something. And when you look at it, you become, or even op art is the most obvious, but you become aware of how your own brain functions. Like you can sort of see yourself being tricked by some way that we analyze information. And I think across the board, everyone has this sort of gaps in how we perceive. And in another similar way, I was just thinking that, this sense about being aware of your body and coming to a point where you think that I don't like these parts, or I do like these parts, or being wholly unsatisfied with your body because you think it should be a certain way because of our culture, that, this kind of hair, or, these kind of, way that you appear is sort of the preferred way in some way. And it's only in sort of recognizing the variety of it that you can start to appreciate what it is that you come to the table with and what your strengths are. So these conversations are so important. And I think that in the ableist world, it's filled with people who don't even know what they don't know. And anytime I've participated in a training, like with Inclusive Arts or other organizations, or brought people to the studio center about, to do like audio descriptive or the description or those kinds of things, it has really affected people who on staff and other people in the residency who didn't even know what they didn't know, and allow people to see the world in a just much more perceptive and revealing way that they could never have gotten any other way. So, yeah, now I lost my thread.
No,
I
I
had
think
a point, but go ahead, Katie.
I was gonna say I totally followed, and I think I might have a wrap-up thought, which
Go
is
for it.
which is that I think the focus of this, not just this exhibition, but the work of Inclusive Arts Vermont in general, is really, I mean, it's a lot of things, but what it really comes down to is getting people to look at the world beyond themselves, right? And then the other part is also providing opportunity for people who might not in other spaces to express themselves in a way that's meaningful, or find, like, actually look at themselves for the first time through their own eyes instead of somebody else's eyes. And
Yeah.
I think the exhibition does both of that. You know, it provides this opportunity for both new and emerging artists who may have never displayed work in a show before, and some artists who've been showing for decades, to display their work to a broad audience. But it also gives the audience the opportunity to interact with things like the artwork, but also the accessibility features, and say like, I didn't even know this was a thing.
Right.
And like, how cool that this exists. And the next thing you know, people are researching more about it and expanding their own world and trying to be more inclusive in their own interactions with other people. And that's really what it's all about for me.
Yeah.
That was brilliant.
If I had a mic,
Yeah. I like dropping pencils and pens too. That works. Well, I just want to say thank you so much, everyone, for being here, for being present, for being honest. I learned a lot, and I'm going to do a lot of research myself. But it was really great to know more about your works individually too. So thank you for that. And I can't wait to edit this and blast it to the world.
yeah.
Great.
Thank you so much, John and Aurora, for sharing your work and your
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Honor to be here tonight.
yeah.
I know. John, we have to get coffee sometime, and Katie, I have to come get my art.
Yeah. Until you get it, I might it depends on when you're gonna get it. If it's gonna be a while, I might just hang it in the office because I love it so much. So.
You're welcome to keep it for a while. I don't have anywhere to put it.
Ooh.
Go. Look at
I'm
that.
gonna hang it in my office. I've been saying, I'm like, I really love that piece. So
Look what we just made happen.
Well, I really don't want to come down there to get it. So there's
Right.
that.
That's fine, Aurora. She likes your piece better than mine. Okay.
I mean,
Really nice, Katie. Hurt me, brush me, step on me.
I didn't say
Destroy
it,
me.
you did.
I have to say, it really entertained me because I actually go to Dartmouth Hitchcock for like 90% of my medical stuff. And so they hung our art literally like where the blood draw line people like line up for reception. And every single person had to stand right next to my piece of art, which I thought was hysterical. I was like
Excellent.
standing in line to get my blood drawn. And I was like, hey, look, it's me on the wall, you know?
Give people something to think about.
Yeah. My parents were pissed that they weren't allowed into DHMC because they weren't there for medical appointments. I was like, sorry, you just have to be disabled to see the show. I'm really sorry.
Right? Talk about shifting the whole system.
Yeah, totally.
I will say, John and Aurora, since you're here, the next call for artists is going to go out in August. So if you're interested, it's going to go out in August. We'd love for you both to submit.
Well, I don't think I can with the framework. Aurora probably could. Isn't it for visually impaired artists or no?
No, it's for everybody.
Oh, I thought the framing device was different on this one. Okay, I misunderstood.
Nope. And the theme is masked, but really it's as broad as you want. It's sort of like a new was, like you get to decide what that theme means to you.
You could just look at my website and pick a piece, but you know.
Start hand curating. Be like,
Yeah.
Be like, this is the one that works.
That's not how the system works.
No.
There's a jury.
Darn.
Look, I also want to say how much I love inclusive arts and the Studio Center up in Johnson. It's one of Vermont's golden assets. It's incredible. Before we started, I was telling Kristen how I'd love going to town hall to the lectures and the galleries and the yoga studio up there, and just the artists having lunch together. It's just such a very important center in our community. So thank you for that, and thank you, Inclusive Arts, of course, for everything you've done. But anyway, I'm grateful to both organizations.
Thanks for that, John. All right, I'm going to let you all go.
All right.
All
Good
right,
night,
have a great
friends.
night. Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Hi, thank you.